Hello and welcome to another episode of CISO Tradecraft, the podcast that provides you with the information, knowledge, and wisdom to be a more effective cybersecurity leader. My name is G. Mark Hardy. I'm your host for today, and I've got a special guest, Alex Dorr, and we're going to be talking about something that is probably relevant to most workplaces, including my own, and that is reality-based leadership. Now, as a professional speaker, Alex has helped organizations overcome drama in the workplace to deliver fantastic results. And he's an evangelist of the concept of this reality-based leadership. And we think you're really going to like what he has to say on the show. So, Alex, welcome to CISO Tradecraft.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor and looking forward to see where this ends up, talking about reality-based leadership. Good stuff.
Now, we were talking just a moment before the show started, and tell me a little bit about your background, where you came from, how you ended up doing something like this. I mean, it's kind of interesting idea.
Yeah, it's not the traditional route. So my first career was professional basketball. That was like my first journey, 12 years ago or whatever it is. And I went down that route. And in that time in college, I got a chance to hear our founder, Cy Wakeman, speak on reality-based leadership. And I had seen the message, and it was just a 1 hour, and it talked about just accountability. We'll get into it, the cost of drama on a team. And it was intriguing that I just got done with like a 4-23 year, just terrible 4 wins, 23 losses. I was the leader. I was blaming my coaches.
Did you go to Northwestern, by the way?
No, I didn't.
Because I did. I know what that's like.
I was Division II at the time, but it was just this whole mindset of like, everyone sucks except me. And I heard this message, just the core stuff of what you're going to hear today. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I ended up going overseas, kind of learned this material. And I just like, I'm going to live by this and see what happens. And life shifted a bit in that, and had some good success there. And then I, got into the workplace, became a young leader, used a lot of these tools. And I just noticed the same patterns of drama on our team and in those locker rooms that I had and others had. It was just like that in the workplace. There's these patterns, and they just take away from success and happiness and results. And then I came back and I just wanted to intern with the organization. And I learned the philosophy, got certified to be able to sell it better, to be honest. I just wanted to get involved, spread the message. And then we had a women in banking conference in Omaha, Nebraska. And they're like, we need a female speaker. And I was on the bench, had never spoken before, except for like 10 minutes to get certified. They're like, well, we got this Alex Dorr guy. He could give you a 50-minute keynote. And somehow they said yes. So here I go, I'm on stage, throwing up all night, can't even like get through it. And I knew enough to get through that 50 minutes. And I'm like, I'm never doing that again. And sure enough, 2 people at a 200, you can convince 2, said, bring that into our company. And it just started to go from there. And our founder had been doing it for about 20 years. So if she didn't work the gigs, I did them. And I just kept saying yes. And I kept learning the philosophy and teaching it. And now I'm doing like 150, 160 gigs a year around this material. So that's kind of the shortish story. And it's just been a wild ride.
Well, that sounds fascinating. Yeah, I think when you find something interesting, I know back years earlier, I was teaching solution selling. And that was a course that was out there. And that was Michael Bosworth stuff. And it was very interesting. This is back in the early 90s. And then as you go ahead and you learn other things that are very interesting for topics, but to get an opportunity to join in, if you will, kind of at the ground level of an organization, maybe not necessarily from their history, but from your history, and then grow with that, sounds like a fascinating opportunity, because now you're actually living the role that you're trying to pitch to people, which is be productive, get things done, but forget about this workplace drama, stuff like that. But what then does constitute this term that we've entitled this episode, reality-based leadership? I mean, first of all, what is that? And then why do we need to be told about that? Don't we live in reality?
Yeah, so this is a juicy topic for right now, definitely. But it's in the simplest term, it is leadership based in reality. And there's so much of in the workplace right now, people are doing a lot of arguing with reality. And we can talk about all the ways that happens. And when you do that, we say you lose, but only 100% of the time. And so reality-based leadership at its core it's all about researching drama in the workplace. And we'll talk about when you're in drama, you're usually operating in kind of fantasy, not reality. And then the behaviors that follow aren't all that helpful for getting results, being engaged at work, or communicating clearly. And so we look at the average person, we found in our research, spends about 2.5 hours a day in drama. And so as a modern leader, reality-based leadership's all about, can we recapture and understand the sources of the drama? And we've identified 5, and then be more aware of those, call a timeout when they come up, and then recapture that energy and get back focused on the mission and vision of our teams, what we're trying to achieve, and upcycle that energy back into that. So in some ways, reality-based leadership, we're energy managers, and all day, every day, we manage energy away from why we can't, why we shouldn't have to, drama, into what would great look like and how can we get there. And a lot of that takes us to get into reality. We like to clean up our thinking. We find our space for impact in the situation, and then we move our team into next right action. And in that first step, clean up thinking gets us into reality. What's the reality of the situation? Even if it's an unpreferred reality, which it often is. And given that unpreferred reality, what's our role and what's our part in it? And then what's next right action? And all day, every day, if leaders can do that with their teams, it's going to be a good day. And there's a lot of engagement there. We get closer to our goals than we ever can. So that's what that really is in a nutshell.
Well, that sounds exciting. And I'm thinking, as a leader, don't I always operate in reality? And so apparently not, because there is always drama in the workplace and things, and you get sucked into them. And so what's a good gut check? How could a person who's listening say, oh yeah, I really need to listen to the rest of this episode? Where do I look for the evidence to suggest that I'm not doing things the way I think I could be doing them?
So the gut check actually, funny enough, is your gut. It's kind of like in your heart. So there's this, the way I start is, imagine there's a light switch on your forehead and it's down or up and not at the same time. And so when it's toggled down, you'll start to feel this in your body. It's like you feel it as stress, anxiety, frustration, anger. You're kind of ruminating in the meeting. Although in the meeting, you're like, tell me more. But in your head, you're kind of like, this person's an idiot. They don't know what they're doing. If only they understood anything about IT. But you're like, tell me more. You'll feel it in your body first. And that's a sign you're in what we call low self. And when you're in low self, like the out of reality is like, we take the facts, we add story, usually negative. So there's like, I'll give you a simple example. I open up an email and there's information missing. Now, if I'm reality based, I look at that email and I'm like, oh, information's missing. This is about a sales order, let's say, or it's a ticket. My job's to add value. So given we don't have the information, what's the next thing I can do to add value? I'm in reality. I'll just pick up the phone that the organization provides for free. I'll reach out, get the information, move this along. That's reality-based, adding value, given the unpreferred reality, beautiful stuff. Conserve energy, make something happen, move it forward, give benefit of the doubt to your colleagues. But most humans with the human condition don't do that. They see an order with information missing, a ticket with information missing, and they jump into a story without noticing it. If they're not careful, it's like, oh my gosh, I do everything around here and no one's committed to quality and everyone's working from home and walking their dog and not focused on what's going on. And why is this on my desk? And so all of a sudden this story hits and the cause of their suffering wasn't the reality, which is a ticket with information missing. That happens all the time. That's some of us, that's our job, is to like figure this out and support. But the suffering comes from the story I make up and believe about reality. And so I call this turning ropes into snakes. I tell the story often like you're on a hike, all's going good, you're having a perfect day, and all of a sudden ahead something's squiggly. Well, most of us jump into, if we're not careful, oh my gosh, are you going to suck the venom out or am I? And if that thing bites me, like let's say I'm in Spain, am I going to go to a Spanish hospital and I'm going to like have an amputation? And how am I going to afford this? I didn't read the fine print. If I've been married long enough, my wife's from Spain, for the universal healthcare, it'd be nice to get a free amputation. All of a sudden this story, I got an amputation in my mind. I can't even think. And I look ahead a little bit. And as I look forward, all I see is it's actually a rope off someone's marketing shoe bag. So what caused my stress, the rope or all of my thoughts about the rope that I believed without question? What do I know for sure? And I know it sounds so basic, but so often our teams are turning ropes into snakes. And so operating in reality is, where are we turning ropes into snakes? What are the facts here? Let's get the problem clarified. And then what's the next thing to add value? And so that first step of cleaning up thinking, I find so much dissolves as a leader if we can just separate out, like on a sheet of paper. We got a lot going on. What's the rope here? What's the snake here? Where are we jumping to conclusions, and where's the cause of our suffering? So I don't know if that helps clarify what we see as the first place we move out of reality is we get into the story our ego makes up about it, and there's the cause of a ton of chaos.
Got it. So what I hear is you got to clear up your thinking or clean up your thinking, because what we're going to do as humans, we think in stories, we communicate in stories. That's why things like the Iliad survived, because it was a long story and people could memorize it.
Yep.
As compared to a whole bunch of numbers and digits and things such as that. Less of a story there.
It's so true. And like, I want to add in IT, a lot of times I talk to people in IT, engineering, accountants. They're like, duh, like, doesn't everybody think like this? And that lies the problem, is we work with other humans in HR and in, people going through change, and we get what the systems are. This is so obvious to us, where we're giving it to people that aren't as comfortable. So they see what you're saying, even though you got it so clear, and they jump from rope to snake. They see it a change and they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to take away from my productivity. And there goes my bonus. And then I'm going to be fired because I'm not very good at change and I don't like digital. So the first step of supporting them is like, let's get back here. Yep, we're updating the system. Phase 1 is this. This is all you're required to do is sign up for training on Thursday. And so if we can just come close in, it helps people through that change process that we're a part of so often. And so often we have great ideas. We have great implementation plans. We have all this great stuff, but we're stuck with people toggled down. And so even the best idea to someone toggled down in low self and seeing ropes and snakes or ropes into snakes, the best change idea will just bump up into it or will go right over their head. And that's where so much chaos happens in implementations is most people we're dealing with are in low self. So reality-based leadership, the first step is toggling people up to high self so they're more receptive to new ideas and change. And that's what high self is where I'm access to all of my intellect. I'm naturally collaborative. I'm naturally innovative. And I have all of my certifications. I'm using all of my best training. But you can't be in low self and high self at the same time. So how do you move from low self to high self if you're feeling stressed in the moment, your body wakes you up to it? I call it toggling up. I just sit back and I ask myself a question. First of all, what do I know for sure? I got this big story going that we're all doomed. What do we know for sure? There's a change being brought up. And then there's a few more questions like, what would great look like? Like in this meeting, I'm about to freak out. I'm about to say something kind of wild here. What would great look like? Oh, from that question, I'm toggled up. Maybe I just listen a bit longer and don't get into why we can't, why we shouldn't have to yet. Or what could I do to help given this situation? Those questions toggle us up. It's the first step to make sure we're in high self in all that we do. So what are your thoughts? That's kind of the starting point there for reality-based.
So is the low self, high self, have you ever read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking, Fast and Slow?
I haven't heard a lot of that. Does he got a similar model?
Go take a look at that, because what he talks about is that as humans, and I'll paraphrase an excellent book, a fantastic book in just a few seconds, is that we have a couple ways of thinking. We have the fast thinking, which kept us alive when a tiger poked its nose out of the cage, or look, you hear a landslide coming and you run out of the way. That's fast thinking. Fast thinking works to keep you alive in a dangerous environment. But slow thinking is how we make decisions and how we go ahead and work on things that are supposed to take a little bit more thought. And so the idea is that if we understand the thinking fast and slow, we understand that people can somehow manipulate us by getting us into fast mode where we're not going to have the benefit of that deep thought. We're not going to think things through, but rather what's going to happen is you're like, scary, run away. And in fact, you just drove them away from something that could have been perfectly good for them. And that's more about protecting yourself, but there's a lot more in there. So
I agree with that. And what I would play on with that from reality-based leadership perspective is know that the ones that survived all these years are the anxious ones. So that's the teams we're dealing with. So if you were one of those, like what I'm saying here, like, oh, what do we know for sure? That's a little movement in the bushes. We don't know yet that it's a saber-toothed tiger. And I just kind of sit there while my buddies run right away. Well, I'm the one that dies. So my lineage is gone. I'm kind of the chill one that makes kind of longer decisions that are more intentional. They're just always the anxious ones. Well, that's who survived over the years. So just know that about biology. So that's what we're up against is like, as change comes, or as in our organizations, we are bringing something new that feels like a saber-toothed tiger, except you're behind a computer in your home office. This is not a saber-toothed tiger, but people respond the same way. So that's where we say that this isn't about the age of the human. It's not about a personality. It's about the human condition. And that's the compassionate part of this is what, as a leader, I'm like, I think you're into one of those patterns of drama. I have the human condition as well. Let's depersonalize it, call time out here, and let's get into a tool like visually writing what's rope, what's snake, so we can see your thinking clearly. So we know now it's not a saber-toothed tiger, and now we can do something about it. So that's a great, I add to that. And then our job as leaders is to remind people we don't have a saber-toothed tiger in the office right now, where some people think they do, to be honest.
And that's a very good point. Now, as a leader, you're in a position of influence. You can go ahead and stop the clock, stop the problem. Let's go work on that. But what if you're in a peer-to-peer situation or a peer-to-many where you're all kind of equivalent to that, where people aren't going to look at you to say, hey, well, by golly, Alex said we should stop and think. Let's stop and think. No, they're just going to keep on rolling. So it's almost as if you need to throw an interrupt in there to go ahead and break this destructive habit of arguing with reality and coming up with all these fantastic stories. How do you do that?
So that's where what I love about reality-based leadership is we start off mostly teaching leaders, and pretty quickly in the session, you realize this is for everyone to step into the power they've always had. So that is a constraint. That is an unpreferred reality. If you have a leader that's like not good at this and you're on a team or you're with peers that You got someone that's always talking, or you got someone that tends to be like all over the place. And so what I always say is, given I have a less than stellar leader, how could I manage this energy towards how we could instead of why we can't in chaos? So I just sit in that for a bit. And what I would do in that meeting is, let's say everyone in this meeting, we're going through a change and everyone's focused on why we can't, why we shouldn't have to. We got someone playing devil's advocate, which they've done for 20 years and it doesn't help, and everyone's getting derailed. I might just say, team, I just raise my hand. I see where we're going. The goal of this is standardization, which will help with efficiency. So I see the goal there. What I'm going to focus on, what I think will be helpful is I'm going to put my energy here. And this is what I think will be helpful about this change. So I just spoke up from my space and just used the reality-based leadership concept of stop judging, start helping, or given that, how could we? So I just lead through that and I see who comes along with me. And what I found, it's like a bug delight. Most people want more clarity, less chaos. They want how we could instead of why we can't. Most people are on your side to try and move it forward, except for like one or two resistors, oftentimes in meeting, that are trying to derail everything. And I often call them the tubas in the meeting. If you played in the band, like the tubas always, you roll out a change in IT, two tubas raise their hand every single time. Like, let me tell you the 100 reasons why that won't work. And it's a pretty good idea. Instead of given the risks ahead, good thing I have expertise. Here's how it could work. I have a couple of concerns. They always go into devil's advocate and it shuts everyone down. And so instead of the tubas trying to quiet the tubas, because tubas just play loud no matter what, I go over to my 10 strings, or I act as a string and I try and raise that noise towards how we could. And then we balance out the tubas. But a lot of times we just let the tubas keep talking, or one tuba keep talking, but I can emerge into that spot that I'm seeing is missing in the world. And the new thing about leadership, the modern leader knows that the leader becomes the one that can manage energy. Leaders don't manage people, they manage the energy of people. So that's a room, no matter what the title is in there, if there's energy in there. And so if I can manage the energy towards how we could, even if I'm an intern, I actually became the leader, even if I'm surrounded by all executives there, because they're focused on why we can't, why we shouldn't have to, why it's a disaster, why, that's not leadership. That is just venting. And I can step into that. And what I want to go back to is the human condition quick to frame this is when we in leadership things are going smooth, you don't really need a lot of leadership. It's called the zone. Let your team ride the wave. Where reality-based leadership comes in, and I think where leadership comes in general, is when people face what I call an unpreferred reality. That's the word I use. And this is a disruption to their day. This is a change they don't like or they didn't expect. This is a client that, someone dropped the ball, or a client, has got an issue. That's an unpreferred reality. And as humans, when they face an unpreferred reality, they do one of two things. That's not very helpful. The first thing is they argue with the unpreferred reality. It sounds like this. Ain't it awful? Things shouldn't be this way. This is absolutely ridiculous. Who thought of this decision? I hear this one a lot. If I ran the place, we would never do X, Y, or Z. Or this is not how the world should work. And so I ask the listeners here, how much of that have you heard lately? And that gets exhausting. So then they get done with that and they jump into this other area that doesn't add any value and leads to a lot of suffering. It's wishing for a different future. It's like this ideal future, but they take no action. So like, well, if someone finally gave a darn about this rollout, they would get in there and do something. Or if someone actually cared about our client and the experience, they would do something, and they take no action. And so if your teams are in those two spaces, or those you lead are in those two spaces, it leads to a ton of disengagement. But there's this tiny space between an unpreferred reality and our ideal future. I call it the space for impact. And this is where leaders live. And this space is so tiny, you got to turn sideways, suck your gut in, and shimmy in there. But that's the space for leadership, especially as an IT leader, is given this unpreferred reality. This isn't ideal. I'll give you that. I'll acknowledge that. And what would great look like? What are we actually trying to do here? And what's the next thing you could try? And so I move the energy in every conversation I can to the yellow. And I say, from that space, let's take action in the yellow. And at the end of the day, if that's what your team's doing throughout any processes you're going through, or change or disruption, we're going to be in a good spot. And that's where people are doing their best work. But I'm finding with a lot of my clients, as I work in IT, as I work in a lot of spaces, there's about 90% of the time that people are arguing with the unpreferred reality and wishing for a different future, but taking no action. And they wonder why they're upset all the time. And so find the yellow, I call it. You can make it whatever color you want, but that's our branding. How can we bridge the gap? And the technique you heard me use there, I love giving that right now as a coaching technique. We use this on the front lines during the pandemic with nurses that are frozen in fear. We use it with accountants. We use it in IT when there's a lot going on. If someone comes up with an unpreferred reality, they're like, I would have gotten that done, but I reached out to the vendor and they didn't get back to me. I validate that. I go, that's frustrating. I don't like when I don't get the information I need. So given that we don't have the information, you hear it, given that we don't have the information, that's an unpreferred reality. What would great look like? We got the info. What else could you try? And so I just wrapped that unpreferred reality, that excuse, into our goal and said, what else could you try? Now we're in the yellow. And most people, I kid you not, I do that technique. They're like, you mean you want me to pick up the phone that the company provides for free and just call them? I go, that's an awesome start.
And pay you a salary while you're doing it?
Yeah. I'm like, and so someone's like, oh, I go on with this a little bit, but someone's like, oh, I did that and they didn't answer. I go, dang, that's an unpreferred reality, same technique. I don't like when that happens. What would great look like? You got the information? What else could you try? You mean you want me, they're obsessed with LinkedIn. You want me to get on LinkedIn and kind of ask them with a direct message? I go, as long as that's not illegal, immoral, and ethical, let's try and get it through LinkedIn. Dang, they didn't answer that. Well, given that unpreferred reality, what else, what would great look like? What could you try? And they're like, you mean you want me to find their house on Zillow and go like stalk them and get the form signed? I go, I'm not talking about stalking people, but the idea in this yellow space is knowing that you can have impact. And so the first part of reality-based leadership is like, are you in a victim mindset or do you see the place for impact? Doesn't mean we go all the way through that. Doesn't mean we enable people to just avoid us and do 100 things and burn ourselves out. But it's, can I find that space? And once you know you can always find that space, people just are on fire in the workplace. And so that's what we try and point people to with all of our tools.
And you find that change in behavior, although people have probably established their modus operandi for years. They learned it maybe as a child. They went through their junior adulthood. Now they're here as full-blown adults out here. Maybe they do it at home and they have a spouse or a close relative who constantly creates drama and sucks them in there. And they're saying, wow, I just need a drama-free zone in my life. I don't know how to get there. It sounds like nirvana. But what I hear you saying here is that it's not a nirvana. It's something that people can create themselves if they understand some of these tools and techniques to recognize when you're arguing with reality. And then instead of just complaining about it, or what I like to say is there's a lot of people who will admire the problem. Man, look at that problem. Oh, isn't that a horrible problem? Wow, my problem is pretty bad. No, just get in there and do something about it. And then
they hide behind problem identification.
Yeah.
I think that adds a lot of value. Now, 30 years ago, that used to, but that's opinion. It's easy to point out the problems. We know we got problems in the world. The expertise is, given the problem, here's what we can do about it, or here's how we mitigate the risk of it. So people are sitting back in opinions, and opinions don't add any value. What we need is expertise. And expertise is, I can say yes early and often to a decision or a change or a situation, even as long as it's not illegal, immoral, unethical. I can get put into any situation. I can quickly evaluate and say, given this, here's the risk we need to mitigate. I got a bunch of expertise, plug and play me wherever. And that's an offensive, modern reality-based leadership stance. A lot of people have to play defense all day and get into their preference and really like control things. And what you got at was the human condition. Actually, you nailed it. The situation you brought up about family, you can wish for a different reality. If only I had a different family, different boss, different project, different software. People keep wishing for a different reality. And what I do is I say, Einstein talked a lot about reality. He said it's neutral at worst. What if reality wasn't the issue? What if you haven't got skillful enough to succeed in your current reality? We can work on trying to perfect reality and bubble wrap you and do all of that. That has never worked. And by the way, that makes it it takes away all your motivation. If I bubble wrap and perfect reality for you, let's just take reality as it is. What if I grew your skill set and got you some tools to be successful in whatever reality came your way? Didn't matter the leader you had, didn't matter the colleagues you had, didn't matter the change, didn't matter how AI comes in. You can trust your skills like toggling up ropes into snakes. I'll give you a few more to be able to add value anyway. And that's freedom. And too often in leadership, we're constantly trying to perfect reality. Like people bring us this list of here's what I need to be happy or successful. And leaders are like, okay, give me that list. I'll go out and perfect reality for you. And then it just reinforces codependency that you're not capable unless I fix your reality. And so it's a vicious cycle. And this is happening in organizations all over the place. The case in point is engagement surveys. If you've heard about these, some big organizations have them. We ask for people's engagement and they give us a list of what needs to change in their workplace for them to be happy or successful. And the problem with that is that engagement's a choice. So I didn't know if you were going to laugh at my jokes. I didn't know if we'd, have some fun on this thing. I didn't know if we'd be all prepared. I didn't know how much time we had totally, but I'm still choosing to engage for you. But it seems as if engagement's by choice. What people do at work is they choose to step down when the going gets tough. They quit mentally In fact, Gallup tells us that 70% of the American workforce quits their jobs every single day. And I say the problem is they keep coming to work and collecting a paycheck because they're quit mentally at work, although collecting resources. And when we disengage, we step out of connection and making a difference. So to make ourselves feel better, we have to come up with reasons, stories, and excuses to justify why we did step down in a tough moment. And we call that BMW driving, which is bitching, moaning, and whining. And then we go up and we wish for a different reality. I'll add value as long as we can get reality changed instead of how can I get more skillful to impact that situation? And then from there, I can maybe give some advice on how to make this easier in the future. So I feel like that's that human condition balance is, am I asking for a perfected reality or am I succeeding in spite of the current reality? And that's a whole different skill set.
Got it. So we got some secrets here. Refuse to argue with reality. Reality is what it is, and embrace it. Take action over opinion. Don't admire problems. Just go ahead and go do something about it. Now, we look at the differences between leadership and management. We've talked a lot about that on the show in past episodes, and I've focused an awful lot of people's attention. What do you see the biggest requirement in a situation like this? Does this require leadership or more effective management to get this process going?
I love that question, actually. It's kind of back to the basics 101. So this is what we talk about is more leadership. So we have a slide. We actually bulleted down to 15 minutes on management because management, it's important, but that should be all left up to our systems, standardization, software, our Salesforce.com, automate as much as you can as far as managing people. That should be the robots. That should be follow our sales process, follow our project management methodology. Like managing people should be really left up to software transparency, like our systems. And then all of reality-based leadership, it's about energy management. And so that's the shift that I think if you look at what happens in organizations, look what happens when we introduce something like Salesforce. There's so much resistance to a system where we have one point of truth that if you're on a sales team, for example, it walks you through exactly what to do, sometimes what to say. So if I'm a brand new employee, I could learn pretty quickly how to sell like a top employee because it's all standardized. But our top employees will raise their hand and say, I know Salesforce is like amazing, but do I have to use it? Can I keep my leads buried in an Excel spreadsheet deep in my hard drive? So they resist the software. And that's a way to hide out in ambiguity. And so I leave a lot of management up to standardized processes, systems. Like we have HubSpot, for example. Every call goes on there, follow-ups automatic. Everybody gets pinged with tasks. So I don't even have to think about management. Our system does that. And we have a few people checking in on that. And then everything else is about leadership, energy management, how we could. And that'd be the shift in general that I hope your teams are thinking about. But watch the human condition. People will resist standardization at all costs. They don't want that transparency. They want to be special. They're like, we're kind of special over here at this location. Do you want us to use that system as well? And that creates a bunch of bad data. We don't know what processes are working. And this is where it gets to be a hot mess. So
yeah. Now, if we want to help employees succeed, regardless of wherever the circumstances are placed, because as you said, reality is going to change, things are going to come up. How do we go ahead and bulletproof them so they go ahead and say, I got this. Come on, bring it on.
Yeah, so I like to teach tools. So the first one I like for any employee to add value, and then I recommend for IT leaders, master what I call the SBAR. And you probably have a template like this, but we use it when someone says, hey, do you have a minute? How many of us get pulled into like stuff we shouldn't be involved in, or if we're fixers, self-proclaimed fixers, we're doers, we jump in and fix, we're like, oh, it's faster for me to do it, let me just do it. And then all of a sudden it reinforces that person's not capable. It gets us into a hot mess. So I teach SBAR. So if someone says, hey, do you have a minute? And I'm an IT leader. I go, I do, but do you have your SBAR? And they're like, what's an SBAR? I go, it's visual. I want you to write out SBAR because the ego loves verbal dialogue and ambiguity. This is why it loves to like talk about things, vent. It likes to just talk out loud and never have to nail it down and get accountable. So we put it into an SBAR. So imagine SBAR. S is the situation, one sentence. Now that's hard to get into a ropes into snakes because you have to boil it down to here's the situation we're dealing with this client or this ticket or this situation. So the B of the SBAR is the relevant background. And I want the person tying this to strategy. So what are the top 5 things we're focused on as of now? And this might fit into your strategic plan and what are our key focuses? And then the A is your analysis, which is you've looked at it, you've looked at the data. This is expertise, not opinion. So what's the data, analytics, what's best practice in IT or with this situation? How do we handle this in the past? What's our decision-making tree? Who have you reached out to that are experts on this? Who knows about the system in this way? Not gut feelings, opinions, preferences. And then the R is recommendations, plural. And the ego likes to give one recommendation. Many of you will notice. It's like, the only way to do this is my way. Or it goes, well, you're paid the big bucks. You figure it out. And they just dump it on your desk. No, I say, really, what are your ideas? And I've heard leaders say, don't come to me with a problem without a solution. I think we've all been with a leader that says that. I find that so funny. When I had a leader that did that, I'm like, why would I come to you if I had the solution? I just keep working. And so this is an idea to move us forward towards the goal and the recommendations. So 2 to 5. And then as a leader, imagine everybody comes to you with SBARs. You coach a little bit on drama if the situation's too long. We add some A for analysis if you know more. And then R, a lot of times I'm like, awesome job. Go with number 3. Great work on that. So he or she who processes the work takes action on it. So they process the work. You got to see how they think through a problem. You get to know your team and what they need to work on. And then they're empowered. They go do it. And you're freed up to do this weird thing like your job, which you haven't done in a while. I'm just joking. But it's like, so it frees us up. It keeps us boundaries. But I find some leaders are scared to use SBARs because the value they've gotten in their role is people come to us like a slot machine and we're good at processing and giving them answers. And we feel really empowered, but we're not leading it. We're like a slot machine of fixing. And so how you transfer knowledge and get your team empowered and spread your leadership is get everybody the SBAR. And as they start to trust themselves, they make more decisions without you. And then they only bring you higher level decisions. And then you really get to go to the next level. So that'd be our main tool for like ditching all 4 sources of drama in one conversation. And you can do that to set up one-on-ones, set up meetings with the SBAR. Here's the situation, background analysis. I need your recommendations. Mm-hmm. That really clears up communication very quickly.
So we're into a system of thinking, a way of framing discussions so that when someone says, hey, have you got a minute, which is an unstructured conversation, and the problem with unstructured conversations, you may or may not be interested, it may or may not be relevant, may not be a good use of your time. But now with the SBAR, here's the situation, here's the relevant background, here's my analysis, and here's recommendations, because if you say, hey, don't come to me without a solution, no, I'd rather say, come to me with some proposals for solutions, and we'll figure out which one is best for the organization. And so when someone they load the deck, I said, what do you want for dessert? Well, we could either have chocolate cake or we could have ground up pieces of glass. No, that's not a decision. I want chocolate cake or vanilla ice cream, and then tell me why, what are the benefits of each? Now, if I'm an executive and I'm responsible for assessing risk and determining what's both best for the company, that's great. But it's one of the dangers that people make that we have to be aware of is don't stack the deck for your boss. Go back to the debate club. If you ever run a debate club in high school, you have to argue one side of it, then you argue the other side. And you have to try to be convincing on both sides. And if you can do that, you better understand your own argument because you've been able to articulate the reasons for why the opposite argument could be valid. And now you can go after that. And you're not just arguing with reality, you're arguing with the facts that they have. And you say, yes, this is what you base your argument on, but here's why that's not a foundational basis because of this, and you pile up the evidence. So it really comes into the SBAR, the E at the end. The evidence is what's going to make all of this work really well for you.
Yes. It's all spot on. And so I like that framework. And some people, like I was working with the group, they're like, well, that's not going to tell us exactly how to make this fancy decision of how many, diesel engines to put in our Peoria, Illinois plant. So they were like, the SBAR is going to solve all that. I go, the whole idea of the tool is not to do that sophisticated math and algorithms that you have probably internally. That's the SBARs get us into high self, right mind to have like an anchoring document for what the problem is. And then there'll be some details we got to get into, but the recommendation might be use our internal analytics team to make that decision. And then you have the fancy algorithms and stuff like that to do that. So I love that tool as a starter. And you're spot on. And I want to go back to, because with a reality-based leadership, again, sometimes people use it to get excited. It's too harsh because that's a tool for venting, actually. And we've done a lot of research and looked at the research on venting. And the number one thing to take away on your teams is that venting is just not helpful. We joke, and it's like not a good joke, but like venting feels good, but so does some like really hard, like illegal chemicals, right? And people in healthcare tell me it all the time, like this stuff feels really good. And I'm like, it does, but is it a sustainable lifestyle? Do we want it at work? And when someone vents, it carves a neural pathway that's fueled by negativity. So in order to keep it from itching so much, you have to feed it with the same behavior that was used to create it. So venting leads to more venting. And so what I like about the SBAR is it gives you a chance when someone's frustrated to say, I'm going to validate that experience. This is an unpreferred reality. I see why you're frustrated that this situation you're in it. So I start with empathy. And then the SBAR is that call to greatness. And it's like, how can we think through this differently and move forward? And that's where I love you up and I call you up, but I don't go right into the call to greatness without empathizing that this is frustrating. So I always want to start there before a tool and validate that and really feel that. I'm like, I hate when I'm in this situation. Now let me coach you through it or thought partner with you through it. Because some people just hear someone really frustrated or they're really distraught. They're like, well, let's SBAR this. And it's a little bit too rigid. And so I love that. Validate your experience. And now let's invite you to question the sense you're making of it, that it's impossible to solve. Let's get into an SBAR. And that gives you a way out. In that pattern, I call it the shadow of a leader. The more every time someone comes to you and you welcome them with validating their experience, love, and then you call them up, they start to realize you do that every time. And then I'm about to come to your office and I'm like, what's he going to do? Oh, he's just going to say, yeah, that stinks. And given that, what can you do about it? And I just still go do it myself. And so I transfer my leadership. It's almost like if you have a parent or a wise aunt that told you all this great advice and you're frustrated in the moment and all of a sudden you hear it in your ear. That's how you transfer your leadership and succession planning where your team's awesome when you're not there. And so I love these tools because they transfer your decision-making and your thought process over to your team so they empower themselves.
And what you pointed out is an aspect that I have indicated in my leadership training that I offer to people. I said, if you're in a role as a leader, there's something that I will almost guarantee is not in your job description. And yet it is probably job one. And that is to develop your people. Not to protect them, not to absolve them of decision-making, not to go ahead and ensure that they executed 101% of capacity so that the MBAs up in the top office are really happy, but you develop your people. And by developing your people, I mean you empower them to give them the skill sets, the capabilities to succeed, and ultimately to advance and do better where you are. Now, military, that's how we always had to be training our replacements. Why? Because let's face it, you're expendable. Captain of a ship.
Yeah.
The captain dies, the ship doesn't surrender. You just keep on going. The XO takes over. And something happens, the XO, the ops boss takes over. And something happens, it keeps on going down until you've got one sailor left saying, I'm in charge. I'm going to go ahead and still fight the ship. And what we do is we create a new reality for people to say, you are part of a success chain. You are part of a group that is going to get to this mission. You can be part of it or you can choose not to be part of it, but you choose not to be part of it through the complaining, through the avoiding of reality, by venting, by doing all these other types of behaviors, and none of those do anything to move the ball forward. You're basically, back to that old phrase, admiring the problem. And you want to roll up your sleeves, get in there and do something. Now, there's another thought that you had on there, saw on your website that was kind of struck me as interesting. It said, work to be happy rather than right. And that seems like really good marriage advice because most husbands know that after a number of years, it's not whether you're right or not, it's whether or not that you've reached an amicable decision. It's okay not to be right.
Well, that's a good toggle up question that you brought up. I'm glad you caught that. I haven't trained on that for a while, but sometimes we'll go through 17 tools and someone will be so stuck in low self. They've worked with a leader for 17 years and they're just convinced I get it. What else you got? And we give them a tool. They're like, what else you got? What if you did a given that? What else you got? What if you tried to make amends? What else you got? What if you said, here's my story about the situation. I've written it down, rope into snake. I don't think this is your heart, but is this what you're trying to do is sabotage my career and make my life a nightmare? And if we come together, that's Brene Brown's stuff. How can you break the ice there, say it's your ego, write out the story and say, I don't think this is your heart, and see if the person goes, yeah, Alex, I'm trying to ruin your life. That someone's convinced this person's ruined their life. And so eventually the last question when you're desperate is let's just pause here. Let's toggle up. What if you are right? Would you rather be right or happy? Because how are you feeling right now? I am frustrated every day. I'm fighting to be right. I'm like, would you rather be right or successful here? Because right now this pathway is it's been 7 years now. And it's that final question is hopefully a toggle up. And I bring that up because some people, I want you to be aware, have a toggle switch that's rusted down. And this is when the ego's totally got control. This thing's so rusty, you could say, hey, you want to free $1 million? And that person's first question is, what are the taxes on that? I'm not sure. It's it's a free $1 million. Who cares? It's they're so toggled down that you introduce a change that would change their life at work, that would help them standardize so much nonsense they're doing. And they're like, no, I don't like change. It'll take me 2 years to come around to that. It's but this would free you up for hours. No, it's there's no consideration for improvement. And that long-term, even if they're a genius, would be maybe a performance issue for a reality-based leadership perspective because everybody's on teams now. You can't, even if someone's a rock star, if they're big drama, it's actually not a rock star, it's fuzzy math. And so that's the idea there. I love that. Would you rather be right or happy? That's kind of a last second desperate heave, Hail Mary, if someone's really locked into ego. So that's a good catch.
Interesting, perspective on that one. So a couple things as we're getting kind of ready to wrap up. We've talked about leadership and the importance thereof. And a lot of things come to mind, the concept of a situational leadership model where you go ahead and you go through someone who's kind of the forming, storming, norming, performing, and you go with the Tuckman teaming model and all these other models that I've learned and trained and utilized in my workspace as well as in the classroom. Does this develop into its own leadership model? Does it go alongside existing models? How does one best incorporate this and then make it sticky so it doesn't become a fad that we're all excited and just like joining a gym on the 1st of January, by the 1st of February, everybody's back eating the ice cream again?
So there's a couple things to that, because this is a random story I never told, but when our founder moved our office location, I got in the back of like the office and I found all of the golds from the 80s. She's been doing this for 30 years, in the 90s, like Cubby's stuff. I mean, you name it. All these things you're saying, I got the binder from like the 80s. And I read through that, and this stuff's so good. Like these other, it's so good. These universal principles, the reflection exercises. And it's so funny, like we're just kind of dusting off and saying it differently. But what I would say that's different about reality-based leadership that sticks around, it's like you really talk about the elephant in the room, calling it drama. And so like with groups I work with, once they hear it, you can't unhear it. Even if someone wants to continue being drama, and I don't know if other philosophies are like this, but some of them are around productivity and they're around like efficiency. And those words are a little bit played out right now because people want balance, but drama, you can't like unhear that. So it really sticks around because at least, 20% of your teams that hear this, the twinkles in their eye, that's like, this meeting is absolutely what we just talked about. This is drama. It's why we can't, everybody's out of their role. Nobody's focused on how we could. Like you can't unsee it. So eventually, even if no one's using it, someone gets so desperate. It's almost like the suffering causes the movement. They're like, I can't handle another meeting without a tool to get us focused on how we could. What did that guy talk about? Was it reality-based leadership? You're just desperate for some clarity, for someone to step up and get it visual. And I bring that up because the tools we teach, just like many of those you brought up, we say, if you're not using the tools, you're not ditching the drama. Like you can't talk someone into seeing reality clearly. You have to draw it up for them. And it's not condescending. So I want to give you an example quick to finish, if I can, of my favorite tool. It's called thinking inside the box, to illustrate this. And so I had a nurse leader come up, and they were prior to the pandemic, but she was burned out. And I know in IT, a lot of us, there's just burnout everywhere. And she was exhausted. She had bags under her eyes. And she got done, I did a 20-minute rah-rah speech. And she's like, get practical with me. What would you do about this problem? I work 12 to 14 hours a day in my shift. There's 24 hours in the day, and I can't get enough sleep. And so I first validated that experience. I always validate the feeling, because people need to be able to feel their feelings. We don't want to shut down feelings. We want to validate the feeling, but watch for the venting. So I said, I'm sorry to hear that. I see that you're struggling. I'm not great when I'm tired, but I have a tool, like a way we could think through this. If you're game, it might be helpful. Are you open? So it's an invitation. She said, yes. So I turned, and I didn't talk to her about sleep, or I didn't talk her into this or use a technique. I drew a box on the wall, and I said, it sounds like your goal at the top I put is more sleep. She goes, you're a good listener. I go, that's what you said. And it sounds like you work a 12 to 14 hour shift. That's on the left side. And it sounds like there's only 24 hours in the day. So those are your constraints. And then I shared that most people try to think outside the box to innovate and solve problems. And I found that only leads to an argument with reality that you'll lose only 100% of the time. Because we have constraints. We got budget constraints, time constraints. This is the name of the game in IT. And I remember the first time, by the way, when I did thinking outside the box, my team raised their hand. They're like, I got an idea. We could hire 4 more people, and that's solved. And I was just in a meeting, and what did I find out? We don't have any more money. We're on a hiring freeze, and nobody wants to work anymore. And then the next day, the next person raised their hand, and they said, we could solve this easily. Let's just update the system, and we'll spend $200,000 and have a new system, and it's all done. I like this other system better. And I was just in another meeting, and we're on the same system until 2028. So I'm like, good idea. Both of you know. I value your opinion, but no. And they got mad at me. They're like, what kind of leadership is this? We give you perfect solutions. All you do is say no. I'm not going to play anymore. And that's what thinking outside the box does, is we just say no. They get mad at us and their arguments with reality. So I drew up this box for her. We had the constraints on either side. And I said, given that your goal is more sleep, and given that you work a 12 to 14 hour shift, there's only 24 hours in the day, how could you move towards that goal? Think inside the box. Well, of course, she had the human condition. She goes, well, go talk to my manager. These 12 to 14-hour shifts are ridiculous. And I just pointed to the tool and I said, see how you went outside the box, sir? That's a constraint. These shifts are your reality. Let's get in the box. And then she got mad at me. So I was standing in front of her. So I turned and stood beside her. And now I'm looking at the tool together. We're on the same team. She's not mad at me anymore where she's looking at the tool. We're on the same side. And she smiles and goes, could you find 2 more hours in the day? Can we do 26-hour days? I go, I don't think we can change the whole world to that utopia. I wish we could. So let's get back in the box. And I'll never forget. It was so silent. She punched the air and goes, you're right. I watched too much Netflix. And I wrote Netflix in the box. That was an idea that could get us to the goal without changing reality. It was a shift in mindset, just like what we've talked about. And then she kept going. She's toggled up. She goes, I do get on my phone after my shift and I doom scroll on TikTok. I suppose I could put my phone down after my shift on airplane mode. And I'm not blaming the victim, but it was so funny. I said, which one of these do you want to commit to? She goes, I'll put my phone down. And she got an hour and a half back. She wanted 2.5 hours. We're on our way. And for 10 years, I'm not blaming the victim, but their problem had been healthcare, the job, her leaders, the industry. Mm-hmm. And in that one moment, what was her only issue? Her inability to put her phone down. And my joke is, what's a better strategy short-term for happiness? Change the whole U.S. healthcare system or get better at putting your phone down?
And it's a very good point because you zoom in on the stuff. And I loved it. This has been fascinating. I think I've probably done more listening than I have in almost any episode that I've done so far because you're just such a compelling presenter. But we are out of time. And so I'm going to have to apologize for that. But for people who want to hear a little bit more about you, Alex Dorr, by the way, is your name again. How do I get in touch with you? How would I follow up?
Just realitybasedleadership.com. We like our podcasts and our LinkedIn's where we're putting a lot of content, and we're there for you. A bunch of free stuff online. And I know I've done most of the talking. That's why you didn't have time to get in. I know you have even better content to add, but I'm grateful for the opportunity. Love your teams up, but call them up to greatness. I like the SBAR. I like toggling up. I like giving that. I like thinking inside the box. Those are practical tools that people crave right now. They want you to frame up the reality and say, this is unpreferred. We do have 10 constraints, but our job's to find the yellow and go towards the goal. And people activate once you frame up a clear view of reality. They step in big ways.
Well, I think it's a wonderful summary. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our podcast. So for our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in to CISO Tradecraft. If you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're not, go ahead and subscribe there. And I think you can go ahead and get our delivery a little bit different way. Tell other people where you're learning your leadership tips from to help them with their journey in their cybersecurity careers. Until next time, this is your host, G. Mark Hardy. Thank you for listening to CISO Tradecraft, and stay safe out there.